Hey everybody and welcome. I hope you enjoyed part 1 of rigging. This is part 2. Let's do it.
So I've gone ahead and duplicated the controls over to the back. I did scale them up a little bit. And I should probably mention I did duplicate the group, not just the control. So I've selected a control and I press up. That's the group. And I've duplicated that. I'll show you guys a bit later why I did that. It just gives me a little bit more flexibility down the line. So I think what I am going to do is I'm going to select all of these controls, and very important to just freeze these transformations. Freeze transformations. Make sure that the control in its default position is always 0. This means that later down the line, if you're animating it and you're placing it somewhere else and you want to just go back to the default pose, you can just 0 it out and it'll snap back. I also think that I want these controls to be pivoting from that joint. So I'm just going to select the control and then I'm going to hold in D. This unlocks the pivot for the control. And so I'm holding in D, and then I'm also going to hold in V, and this is going to snap it to that joint. Actually, let me just turn off geometry because it's snapping to vertices. So I'm holding in V again, and I'm just snapping it exactly to that joint. Just going to do the same thing for this side. B, V, snap. Alright, so there's those two controls. Show polygons. Cool. Let's see, let's quickly create a root control. Create nib circle. Let's scale up this guy. Snap him to this joint with the root. You can probably just shape this a little bit. Doesn't really matter. You can make the controls look like however you want. There is different software also to kind of like, or apps or add-ons, plugins, whatever you want to call it, to make these controls customized or make them look different, thicker maybe. There is ways to kind of like make them different colors and everything. It gets handy if you have a character that's very busy. You probably want to color code some of these controls. Alright, so I've got this control here. I'm just going to go ahead and freeze the transformations and call this root con. I'm also going to go ahead and group him. So and I'm just going to center the pivot. I just press Ctrl G for the group, center pivot. Root on GR. Okay, and I think I'm going to create a master control as well so long. So I'll just duplicate that group. And I'll name this MasterCon GR, and the control itself MasterCon, and just to make it look a little bit different than the other one. So the idea of this is, I think this will be the control that I use to do the bulk of the animation. So I'm going to set up these landing gear to follow this master control, and then this root control here I'm going to use to, when the ship lands, to create, so I can actually lock these things on the ground, and then this will just be moving the ship itself and not the landing gear. Let's see, I can also quickly create these controls for the engines. So let's create, circle. Let's rotate this up. So let me just quickly show you. So obviously one benefit of grouping this is, say for instance, I freeze the transformations here and I group it and just say modify. What can I see? It's my modify center pivot. So if I'm moving this group, you can see I've got translation values there, and if I rotate it, I've got some values there. But if I select just the control, it's all still on 0. Anyway, that's not really just the point. Sometimes you want to create like a hierarchy of groups, so you're constraining something to the bottom object, and it just gives you more, like I said, more flexibility down the line. So I'm just going to undo that, and I'm going to rotate this group 90 degrees. And I want to snap this to that root joint there for the engine. So let's just turn off this. And let's snap it there. Show polygons. Alright, I think that'll be okay. So this will be the R engine, say control, just copy that, and the group will be R engine con gr. And what I'm also going to do so long is I'm just going to set up an attribute that I'm going to use to drive these propellers with it, and maybe for the back as well. So I'm going to go edit, add attribute, and I'm going to call the one spin. I'm not going to set any limits here. And then for the back thrusters, I think I'm going to show you guys how to set up a set driven key to drive this. So I'm going to call that, let's say, thrusters. I'm sure it's called something else, but I'll just go with thrusters. And I'll make the minimum 0, maximum 10, and I'll add that so long. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select the group and I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to move it over to this side. Just turn off the geometry and snap to joint. Show polygons, and this will be L engine and L engine GR. Oh, was it already named correctly? Did I name the other one? Oh, so I named the other one wrong. So this is L engine, and this was, yeah, R engine. Why am I so confused? That's it. Alright, so it's got the attributes in there already. And these joints, you can also like change the joint size here, the radius if it's too big or too small. So this joint has already been skinned to that geometry. So what I'm quickly going to do is I'm going to select this control, and I'm going to go to Edit, Connection Editor. So this is the connection editor. This on the left side is this control. It's got everything you can do with it. So there at the bottom you see the spin attribute. So I'm going to just select that, and then I'm going to select this joint, and I'm going to put it on the right side. So reload right, and I'm going to look for the rotate. What's this? Rotate Z. There we go. Rotate Z. Let's just see if this is working. There you go. Very easy to set that up. I'll do the same on the other one. I'll get back to setting up the set driven key in a bit. So what I'm also going to do now is I'm going to select these two, and I'm going to press up to select their groups, and then I'm going to shift select this, and I'm going to press parent, and I'm going to select this guy, and I'm going to press up for his group, and I'm going to shift select this guy, press parent. And let's see, I think I'll leave it there. I'll get back, I'll rig these guys separately, so I'll get back to them. I think this is pretty good so far. So, oh right, I probably need to connect this. So this hasn't been connected to the actual joint yet. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna select this, and I'm gonna shift select the root joint, and I'm gonna press constrain parent. So parent constraint is basically the point and the orient constraint combined. Just gonna make sure that the maintain offset is on, and press apply. So now if I move this, I should be moving the whole root. That's right. And let's see, I don't need to constrain this to the controls. These are just for me to have access to these attributes. So I'm not gonna have to animate these later down the line. In fact, what we can probably even do just to tidy this up is we can select all of these attributes, and we can probably just lock them, as well as, if you bear with me, we can just say hide, so we can just see the spin and the thrusters. And let's see, what else can we do here? So we've got the main control, we've got the root control, we've got the engine controls. I've shown you how to set those up, and I can create NURB circle, just creating two more, so I'll scale this up, and let's just group that, modify center pivot, I'm gonna rotate it 90 degrees this way. I'm gonna snap it to this gun. There we go. Show polygons. So yeah, I'll use these to drive the guns. I'll just shape them something a little bit more interesting and a bit easier to select. Something like that. go with this for now. So the pivot is exactly the same as the gun there. And well, let's just see if I can copy this. So I'm going to freeze the transformations for this one. Modify freeze. And we'll just call this R gun 1. And it's in a group R gun 1 GR. I'm going to duplicate this group and I'm going to scale it in the Y -1, -1. So I've got my second control. Just going to turn off polygons and just snap it to that joint. Show polygons. So I'm going to select both of these gun controls. They've both got, have I already frozen them? Yeah, I have. Okay, so both of them are already frozen. I should probably rename this one to L gun and L gun GR. Okay, so select the control and then shift select the joint. And for this one, I'm just going to do an orient constraint because I only want it to rotate with the control. I'll keep that on. Apply. So the reason I'm keeping those maintain offsets on is the control isn't necessarily the exact rotation order as the joint. So say for instance the joint's Y is pointing upwards and the control's Y is pointing forwards. It doesn't really matter in this case. When I tick this off, it's gonna flip the joint around and that might break the skinning or something. So in this case, I'm just keeping it on. So I've done that constraint, so now I can rotate that gun. I'll do the same for this one. Shift select the joint and I'll just press G to repeat action. Oh, what am I doing? Oh, it's because I've still got the joint selected. So there we go. We just want to select the control. So that's set up. So I'm going to select both these controls. And I'm just going to press up. And I'm then going to just parent them to this control, to the root control. So now the root control has got the guns, it's got the engines, the master control's got everything. When I rig these guys up, I'll also parent them to this master control. Now let me show you how to set up these thrusters. So like I mentioned before, I'm going to do a set driven key for them. So I'm going to select this control and then I'm going to go to the animation tab and I'm going to go key, set driven key. There we go. Set driven key, set options. So we need the driver to be the control and the thruster attribute. And then driven is going to be every single one of these joints that we have also skinned to the geometry. So let me just select each one of them. Let's check I got them all. I missed this one. So we're going to be playing with the rotate X. So I'm going to load all of them as load driven. And then in here, I'm going to select all of them and select rotate X. So in the default position for the thruster, this is at 0. So we'll just set key. So it knows that whenever it's at 0, it's always going to be in this position. And then I'm going to take the thrusters and I'm going to push it to 10. And then instead of reselecting everything again, I'm just going to go select driven items and that selects everything for me. And I'm just going to rotate it to about, let's round it off to, let's say 30. And again, I'm going to say key. So now if I select this, let's just hide the joints. And I drag this attribute. There we go. Quick and easy. So for this front landing gear, I want to create a little bit more of an interesting setup. I want to be able to move this bottom section and get a little bit of offset between these two sections, so it doesn't just move as one single piece. So what I'm going to start by doing is just constrain it to this joint. So now I've got that section moving with this part. And then what I'm going to do is I'm also going to constrain the control to that top joint. So now the whole thing will move as one big section. But the nice thing about constraints is you can kind of split the weight between different objects. So if I select, say, the root joint, and I constrain this to the root, constrain parent. Now if I select this joint, I can see it's constrained to two things. It's constrained to the landing gear control and to the root. And it's because both are set to 1, it's technically following both 50-50. So if I move this, I'm getting that little bit of an offset, but it's a bit too much because by the time I get there, it starts intersecting. So what I can do is I can select this joint and I can make the root's weight 0.4. Let's see what that does. That's probably just enough because by the time it gets out of there, you don't see an intersection. So that just gives me that nice little bit of an offset for free, basically. So I'm just going to set this back to 0. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just connect the root control to the actual root. Constrain parent. I'm doing a parent because I want it to translate as well as rotate, and that's what the parent does. Okay, and then I'm going to select the root control and I'm going to press up for the group, and I'm going to parent the group to this master control. Press P. So now I've got this set up. I can see if I move the master control, that control is staying behind. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this control, press up for the group, and then I'm going to parent that group to the master control. Basically, so if I move this, it's moving that front landing gear, but if I move this section, it'll give me that nice little bit of bounce that I'd want when the ship lands. Right there. What I can also quickly do is, obviously these gun controls aren't following, so I'll just select both of them, press up for the group, and shift select root, press P. And now I've got the gun controls following. And if I want to make this thing fly, I've got the landing gear following as well, so I can tuck this landing gear up into the body, and everything still follows around nicely. Okay, so let's do a slightly more complex setup here. So basically, we have two joints here. So we want to be able to drive both of these joints all from this one control, and we want to be able to rotate this joint when this thing rotates. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select that control, and then I'm going to do that RN constraint we did earlier. So there we go, I've got the RN constraint working. You can see I've already just gone ahead and set up a control for this guy here. I haven't connected it yet, but I figure I'm just gonna leave this to kind of manually rotate it, because I think the way I want to animate this thing is like I want these things to like look kind of rickety and broken and loose. So I'll just hand animate that. And now I'm going to create an IK handle between these joints. So an IK handle is basically just a tool we use to create a connection between joints so that we can animate the whole chain just with one control. So before I do that, because this joint is set to 0, or it's supposed to be, it's set to 0. I'm just going to rotate it in the angle that I want it to rotate. And I'm going to right click on it and say set preferred angle. And I'm going to set that back to 0. And then I'm going to go to the rigging tab, under skeleton, create IK handle. So I'm just going to click the top joint and then this one. And there we go. So I've got the IK handle selected currently. So with the IK handle selected, I'm going to shift select the control and just press P for parent. And there's the little back landing gear setup. You can rotate these guys. So that seems fairly easy. I'm going to select this guy and I'm just going to constrain it to constrain a joint to it. Constrain orient. Let's just check that's working. So that's fine. So here I've got a little interesting problem. So this joint is not supposed to kind of be following with it exactly. We want this to kind of look like it's connected on this side. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this joint And then I'm going to shift select this joint, and I'm going to go to constrain, aim. Just check that this is on, maintain offset, and apply. So it's basically telling this joint in this position to always aim in that direction. So now if I rotate this, it's doing exactly that. So I'm getting that bit of nice secondary movement there for free, or it looks like it's secondary. It's just basically constraining it in the same axis. And what else can I do here? I think that's fine. Same as I did here, I'll probably just set up like separate NURBS curves controls for these guys and just orient constrain them. And I think that's pretty much all I'll need. So I'm going to select this control and I'm going to press up for the group. And oh, before I do that, sorry, I'm just going to select this one, press up for the group, and I'm going to parent it to this control. And that's fine. I can always just, when it goes, if it goes up, I can counter animate this guy, and I can probably lift this guy a little bit like that. Okay, so now I've got this selected, press up for the group, and I'm gonna parent it to this one. So press P. So it's following the ship if the ship's flying, and if the ship's landed, it's not gonna follow. It's gonna give me that nice little bit of IK landing there. That's the same way we basically rig up a human's leg or a character's leg. And I think that's it for the back landing gear. I'll just go ahead and repeat the same steps on the other side. Alright, let's just do a quick recap and start wrapping up this rig. So we've got our engines rigged up, we've got the spins, we've got the thrusters, we've got all the landing gear at the back rigged up and working. I've added controls for these flaps, quite basic with just orient constraints. We've got our front landing gear rigged, we've got our guns working and rigged, we've got our master control for doing the bulk of the animation, and then this root control for when it's landed. If you remember in the beginning, I put all the geometry in this razor's edge node here. What I'm going to do actually is I'm just going to copy that name, and I'm just going to rename this as geometry. And then I'm going to group that again, and I'm going to name this group razor edge. So what I'm going to do now, just to kind of start tidying up, I want all of this to be under one group. So I'm going to select the master control and the root, and I'm just going to Control G group that. I'll just call that, let's say, rig. And I'm going to put that under, sorry, in here you have to middle mouse drag under razor edge. So you'll see now if I select this razor edge and I drag it, it's going to break. The geometry is moving away from the controls. That's because it's translating from this group, and also it's being deformed by the joints. So I'm literally moving the geometry as well as the joints that's also moving it. So it's double transforming. So I'm just going to select this geometry group, and I'm going to press Control A for the attributes. And I'm going to turn off this inherit transform. So now if I just select this razor edge, I can move the whole thing around. This is pretty handy for just keeping your scene clean, and if you want to place the characters initially, kind of place them where you want them, and then from there the animators can just take over and do what they need. So yeah, there we go. I think last step is probably we can just hide the joints. What you can also do is, instead of hiding the joints in here, you can have all the joints like maybe in a layer and just call it no touch or don't touch or no touchy and lock that layer. But for this purposes, I think we can keep it fairly simple and just hide it in there. And there we go. This is our little spaceship that we've rigged up. Set that to 0. And I think we are ready to start animating this guy.